Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Huge victory. The big three have, surrendered. I mean, look, strikes work. Worker action works. Worker power, militancy, all the stuff we've been talking about for years in this program. It works. Been saying it works for a long time. It works. And I was looking at the 36-page document that was kind of leaked to me by some of the folks at the UAW going, hey, this is what we got. This is big stuff. This is good stuff. And yeah, if you were to see what they started out with to where they ended up with, worlds difference. And again, what we've been saying all through this 6-week process is Ford, GM, Stellantis, where they were all saying the same thing, all reading from the corporate playbook. We can't possibly afford it. We can't possibly afford anymore. Yes, we know billions of dollars in profit. Yes, we know $250 billion in profit over the last decade. Yes, we know we pay our executives, $1 billion over the last decade. Yeah, we know all that. But we just can't afford an extra, 25 cents. We just can't afford to have, things for workers, can't afford that cost of living adjustment that has been restored in this contract. We can't afford to get rid of those divisive 2-tier, 3-tier wage systems, which has been eliminated. Can't possibly have the kind of wage growth that historically has been the norm. No, can't possibly have tuition assistance, which was increased to $8,000. Can't have family days maintained, which they have. A whole list of, pages of stuff that before the strike, sorry, we just can't do it. Yeah, we need to be competitive, and yet here at the end of this strike, what they got was almost everything that they were looking for. And look, I remember the demands. People were saying, oh, these are outrageous. This is a moment for the Democrats to take the master's class on negotiating. I know they wanted a 40% raise. They wanted a 32-hour work week. There were a lot of things. The press went crazy. Working people telling me that's too much. And you go, this is negotiations. This is how you do it. You set the goalposts way out there so that you move backwards and you still get a darn good deal, which is what they got. You ask for the sun, the moon, you ask for everything, and you settle for what you're willing to settle for. And now what you're going to see is this isn't the gold standard job that it was when I was a kid, but we're moving in that direction. And how did our mainstream media take it? Business Insider headline, workers at Detroit's Big Three are set to make up to $35 more than at Tesla thanks to new union contracts. And I'm like, that is a great headline. Because those Tesla workers are going to go, what? They make $35 an hour in compensation more than we make for doing the same job? Hey, maybe we should unionize. And look, this is the UAW's next step, to go to those other auto companies and say, look, you can do better. You can have a better life. You can do what Rick talks about all the time. Union job, better life. You can do this. And look what we were able to accomplish with worker power. Not that the laws were on their side, not that government came to rush, although Biden, got to give Biden props here. He did walk the picket line. He did stand in solidarity with those workers. So come election time, UAW, yeah, I got to tell you, it should be a no-brainer on who you're going to endorse in 2024. The guy who was literally on the picket line saying, hey, you deserve the wealth that you earn. Not the guy who was telling you your leadership sold you out and you should stop paying dues. Just kind of throwing that out there as an aside. But today, all I got from the naysayers, and it's amazing to me, is, well, the union didn't get what they promised. And again, it's a lack of understanding how to negotiate. You start off way over here saying, hey, we want all these things. And then you settle for what's really important. Now, for me, what I think is important and what history is going to remember, not the historic wage gains, those are really important, not the cost of living adjustment that's been restored, not all of the good things that they got, not the thousands of dollars in signing bonus money that's coming, not the better life that's coming because of this job. But the fact that they were one of the first people to bring up the idea of a 32-hour work week. Because here's the thing, as technology continues to make productivity gains, the question has to be brought up. What good is it to have an economy if it doesn't benefit working people? And I guess the main question is, why do we have an economy? What is an economy good for? Does it exist to make the few wildly wealthy at the expense of the people who are doing the work and being productive? Or is it to make dreams possible for working people? Is it to help them raise families and lead a prosperous, decent, good life? Is that possible? I mean, the age-old question, do we work to live or live to work? And for me, this component of it, all the other stuff is fabulous. All the other stuff is good. I think they're going to ratify this contract because looking at the 36-page document that was sent to me, I don't know how you turn this down. But for me, it's that 32-hour work week. Because understand, the thing that we take for granted today, the idea of an 8-hour workday, was completely foreign to people in the 1880s and 1890s. In the robber baron age, it was unthinkable that workers would only work 8 hours. Frequently, they were working 10 to 16 hours, 6 days a week. That was the norm. The norm was you basically lived to work. You showed up to make the boss profit. And you were disposable. You were the ultimate gig worker. So this idea that gig work is new, it's not. We're just stealing from the robber baron era. But I couldn't help but think about the fight for the 8-hour day, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. It was a battle cry for a generation of workers in the 1860s, 1870s, and beyond. Look, understand, before the 8-hour movement, there was a 10-hour movement that didn't take hold. But people grabbed onto the 8-hour day, the idea of, you know what? Life should be more than just about work, and that we should share in the wealth of our labor. And look, the moneyed interests, they didn't go quietly into that 8-hour day. They weren't on board with it. There were a few corporations who said, okay, a few benevolent corporations who said, okay, we'll go along because the workers did what workers do. They folded their arms and they marched their feet. The only power that working people truly have, which was on full display the last 6 weeks with the UAW. But it really wasn't until we passed a law, the Fair Labor Standards Act, that mandated a federal maximum hour law of 40 hours. Not the 8-hour day, but 5 days a week, 40 hours. The math added up. So the 8-hour day became the norm. And in union shops, it became the 8-hour day. Overtime started after 8. In fact, I still work in a place where that is the norm. You work 9 hours, you get paid an extra hour overtime. That's how it was. That's what it was for years. And corporate America has destroyed this. And I go back to, understand, the 40-hour work week, the 8-hour day, corporate America did not go silently into that fight. They spent money hand over fist, created organizations, the National Association of Manufacturers, who still, by the way, are one of the thorns in the sides of workers, but the citizens' alliances of that era, who were created specifically to go after working people, keep them in their place, and specifically against the 8-hour day, because it meant lower profits. Because understand, people wanted the 8-hour day, but the same pay. And what they tried is what they do all the time. We'll throw a little money at you. Here's a raise. Without understanding that 8-hour day going from 16 to 8 for the same rate of pay was an enormous raise. They couldn't possibly meet that. But the wealthy understand, here's a couple of trinkets, here's a token. And we're going to fight this. And look, they started their movements, and the merchants and manufacturers associations of the era who, again, campaigned against the 8-hour day, campaigned for open shops, so can't have labor unions. And for me, I see this moment. This could be a triggering moment, and not triggering in the bad way. No, triggering in a positive way that gets people going, hey, why are we working so hard? Life's short. Why are we spending so many hours working for someone, making them profit and not making our lives better? And look, I can see us going for a 32-hour work week movement. But again, it's going to have to be at the same rate of 40 hours. And I would argue we're already working, 60 hours a week for 40 hours pay. So for me, this is a movement opportunity. This is a movement moment where working people can go, yeah, the UAW had a great idea. And what's exciting about this is the UAW of the Ruther era. This is the UAW that built that not just auto worker job prosperity, but helped build a broad-based, prosperous working class in this entire country, to where the 8-hour day we still benefit from, to where overtime, weekends, minimum wage laws, safe working conditions, all of those things that people of the past fought, bled, and died for, we take for granted. There's an opportunity right now for us in this moment, this generation, to fight for something that in 100 years, people are going to look back on and go, hey, look what they did for us. And maybe it'll be normal and they'll take it for granted. But that's okay too. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, I was reading a story today about Joe Biden and his legacy and this idea that Biden is thinking, he's thinking about the future. Her name was Jill Lawrence, I think is her name. She wrote a piece. I think it was over at the Washington. It's either at the Post or the Times. I forget off the top of my head. But she said, surprisingly, because of his age, he's an unusually forward-looking president. And I'm going, no, he's that way because he understands legacy. He understands that he wants to be remembered positively for having accomplished something to help make working people's lives better. I think he gets that. Out of any president of my lifetime, I think Joe Biden understands that better than anyone. But let's quick go to the phones. Got Steve on line one. Steve, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. And I think you sometimes see that kind of attitude, and I don't want to sound like an old fuddy-duddy. I mean, I'm 55, but, among younger people who perhaps didn't have that experience, whose parents didn't have that experience, it may be to them some sort of revolutionary idea that someone would support, basic wage standards and decent retirement programs and decent workplace safety standards and these sorts of things. For Joe Biden, he's of that generation. They remember the labor movement. They, either he remembers it directly or vis-a-vis his parents terribly people lived, through the Great Depression. And then what happened after the Second World War in terms of how great the economy came to be with the help of organized labor. People worked 8-hour days, as you pointed out. And if you worked overtime, you got time and a half. My dad, he sometimes wouldn't spend Thanksgiving with us until later in the day. And on Christmas, he sometimes wouldn't get there until later in the day. Why? He said, hey, I'm at the steel mill. They're offering us triple time because, hey, everybody else is willing to be with their family. They need somebody to work that day.
Yep.
And, heck, you're out of your mind if you think I'm going to be here with you guys to eat Thanksgiving at noon. We can eat Thanksgiving dinner at 6. I'm going to work.
Yeah, but it wasn't triple time, Steve. It was double time with the day's pay. Because he would have gotten paid the day's pay whether he came to work or not. He got paid double time. I have to clarify. That's one of those weird things that I have that I want to make people sure that they understand. Because it's still in some places possible for that today and could be again in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And for some people who again are too young to understand this, their formative years were spent totally alienated from that kind of a concept of a world in which they didn't know anybody who had a pension plan. They didn't know anybody who has a decent job who only had a high school diploma, or trade school background. And that's the problem. Is there are people who still remember this, and Joe Biden's among them. So this idea that he's looking forward. No, in many ways he's looking backward, and what he's witnessed is the erosion of those things in terms of the quality of life that many Americans enjoy. My girlfriend, if you've got a girlfriend or wife, you have to watch TV with them. This is just the thing you have to do. So she's on this watching the Gilded Age program on HBO. So yesterday was the first new episode of the second season, and it's all about the robber barons and that time in American history in the 19th century you're talking about. And go figure, I was laughing. She didn't know what I was laughing about because last night's premiere episode for the second season, there's a meeting with one of the leading characters, and he's meeting with Jay Gould. And, of course, Jay Gould pulls out that famous quote you love to talk about, you could pay half of the poor to kill the other half. He says it right there. I start cracking up. And she's like, what are you laughing at? I'm like, well, I don't want to go into it. But, yeah, I mean, and they were talking about, how indignant they were about what unions wanted. Oh, my God, an 8-hour workday and workplace safety standards and days off and these sorts of things. They thought that the people who wanted this were absolutely crazy. But as you were talking about, what is the point of this? I mean, the whole notion about what my father and my grandfather thought about life was, that for my kids and the grandkids and going down the road, it will get better and better and better. And that was always the American dream. And you're right, we're automating very quickly. By some estimates, half of all manual labor jobs will disappear in the next 25 years. Okay, I'm not going to bemoan the idea that the guy who comes at 5:36 in the morning to pick up the garbage here in downtown Chicago isn't going to have his gig. If we can fully automate that and robots will do it and AI, great. If that guy then can work less, can go somewhere else and do something so that he only has to work a 30 hours a week, and the rest of us can also do that. So guess what? We can have more time with our family. We can do other things, pursue arts and sciences. Who knows what a great society we might develop into? This was the whole Gene Roddenberry dream. When people think of Star Trek, that's what Gene Roddenberry thought. He said, with enough technological progress, we could wipe away the things that we are at war about all the time, the things that we're constantly arguing about and protesting about. That there would be enough for all. Because a lot of the things that we have to do today ourselves will be automated by machines, so that there's no need to pay somebody for that extra labor to grow the food, to process it, to deliver it. All of that could be done automatically. So then why in heaven's name would you need to charge a fortune for it just so people can eat? No, not everybody gets a mansion, but everybody can have a decent home. You don't owe everybody a Rolls Royce or a yacht, but they can have a decent home, can have decent public transportation, and they can have enough to eat every day. Now, if you want to work harder and do other things, I don't begrudge you the capacity to be the wealthy guy in town or one of them, but the people at the bottom should have enough to get by without having to do much in life. That should become at some point, because of the technological advances we've made, that it should just become a human right. You should not have to do anything to just survive. That should just be something that society can provide for you. And beyond that, it's up to you. If you want to waste your whole life playing video games, okay, fine. I'm willing to feed you through that process and give you a prefabbed home. And if that's how you want to live your next 50 years of your life, that's up to you. But other people, I assume, want to do something constructive with their lives. They'll want to cultivate some talent that they have. They'll want to make a contribution.
No, I'm right there with you. It's that, the call for the 8-hour day, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what you will. I love the idea of expanding for what you will. Whatever that is, as you point out, could be video games, could be doing this little program, could be any number of things that people want to follow their passions, or they just want to sit home with their kids. There could be opportunity. I fear, though, we're not going to get to that place because much like the 8-hour day and the fight for the 8-hour day didn't happen broad scale until we had laws that made it so. And our politics are so broken right now, I fear we can't make the kind of adjustments necessary to get us to the place where we need to live the kind of life that you're talking about.
Well, and I will say this, for many years, the argument was that, if you don't give people an incentive, then they won't work, and you won't have a productive economy. Look at the authoritarian socialist regimes of the 20th century. Okay, you know what the great thing about technology is? Technology doesn't have an ideology, and if you put AI in a cornfield and robotic equipment there in order to cultivate the land, it doesn't care whether it's in a socialist society or a free market society. It doesn't work more or less efficiently. So in that sense, technology, it will free us from that debate because it's not as if technology is going to work less hard because, I'm working in a socialist regime. I'm not going to have to work very hard. I mean, what do I have to gain? No, that's not the way a machine thinks. So that means you could actually be as productive. And guess what? We could all share in something. I'm not a socialist, but I do believe that you can share more of what we have in this society, and people can enjoy a better life. And guess what? Every time we've done this, it has improved the quality of life for everyone because when people have more time to think about the things that they want to do in life, they create new things. They create the better mousetrap. They create the new art and the new expressions and all the things that we value in life, as opposed to having to work. I mean, we've all been there where we had so many friends who were talented, but they had to give up their dream. Why? Because they have to pay the bills and raise the kids and do other things. Why? Because society won't give you the chance to go with your dream because there is no formula for that unless your parents are loaded, in which case take until you're 35 or 40 to become the great artist or actor or musician or anything else you want to be. But if you're not loaded, well, you're going to have to give up on your dream sooner or later.
No, it's an excellent point, Steve, and I appreciate you making it. Thanks so much. Good stuff as always. And look, not all of us are, like he pointed out, none of us are independently wealthy that we can just fret away the first several years. We got to get to work. There could be an opportunity here, but it's going to come back to us, the working class of this country, coming back together. And understand, there are forces out there, much like back in that era, moneyed interests. The citizens' alliances of today, otherwise known as Americans for Prosperity, the Heritage Foundation. There are tons of groups hell-bent on dividing working people and keeping us eating each other. Paying one half to kill the other half. But just nicer today. With rhetoric. Until it's not. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day mill workers began to walk off the job at the Phoenix and Gilbert knitting mills in Little Falls, New York. The strike was sandwiched between the Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and the 1913 Patterson textile strike. American, Hungarian, Polish, and Italian workers, over 70% of them women, struck against wage reductions. Their hours had just been cut from 60 hours a week to 54, and their wages adjusted accordingly. A recent Factory Inspection Commission investigation revealed deplorable working and living conditions, among the worst in the state. As a result, state legislators passed protective legislation restricting women's work hours. Many social reformers pushed for laws like these in the hopes of improving women's quality of life by minimizing their exploitation on the job. But the reduction in hours spelled disaster for these mill women, who then faced a loss of income that ranged between 75 cents and $2 a week. Socialists in nearby Schenectady, including the socialist mayor George Lunn, arrived in town and were promptly arrested for giving open-air speeches in support of the strikers. IWW organizers soon followed to help organize picketing, daily strike parades, and strike committees for each of the factories. They quickly established IWW Local 801, the National Industrial Union of Textile Workers. By the end of the month, mounted police closed in on the women strikers and began clubbing them, many into unconsciousness. The police raided strike headquarters and arrested IWW strike committee leaders. But the women strikers stood strong and were celebrating victory by the end of the year. They won full reinstatement and 60 hours pay for 54 hours work.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Wow, a couple of Supreme Court judges say they're starting to think that maybe the court should sort of start thinking about possibly, perhaps someday, adopting some sort of anti-corruption reforms. This tiny group of unelected, supremely powerful judges is allowed to make its own rules of ethical behavior. So, surprise, they've chosen to have no code of conduct like all other top officials are expected to obey. Unsurprisingly then, the justices feel free to accept financial payments, bribes, from moneyed interests seeking favorable legal rulings from the supposedly impartial court. But, oops, the general public has begun to notice the corruption, and public belief in the court's integrity has plummeted. Thus, one of the far-right Supremes, Amy Coney Barrett, is now supporting a vague veil of an ethics code for her colleagues, even as she attests that all are, quote, very committed to the highest standards of ethical conduct. Seriously? Including the notorious money sleaze Clarence Thomas? But wait, even a progressive justice, Elena Kagan, joins in the charade that an ethical code might produce, well, ethics, or at least political cover for the lack thereof. A code, she surmises, would, quote, go far in persuading other people that we are adhering to the highest standards of conduct. Hello, would you be persuaded? Yet, these Supremes won't even take this minimal step of adopting a simple code to measure basic integrity. It would be a good idea for us to do it, Barrett meekly says. It would be a good thing for the court to do that, Kagan echoes. This is Jim Hightower saying, stop it. Stop the pitiful posturing. There's only 9 of you. You're in charge. Convene a happy hour, confront reality, and do the right thing. Just do it. I'll buy the beer.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I came across this ad a couple of weeks ago. It's been now put out by the good folks at We the People 250 Action Fund, and it's a great little, just couple of seconds. It's kids saying the Pledge of Allegiance, but underneath you've got the court documents from Trump's January 6th stuff, and for me it really it really kind of brought home this idea of and justice for all. And, when we were kids, we all stood up, we said the Pledge of Allegiance, we repeated it, but never really, I don't think, thought through what it meant. In fact, a lot of my right-wing friends who, they love the Constitution in their pocket but never read it, they love the Pledge but don't remember it. This is important stuff, and that's why I thought it'd be a good idea to reach out to Tim Ryan, former Ohio congressman and founder of the We the People 250 Action Fund, and get some thoughts on this. Tim, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be with you.
So walk me through, what is this We the People 250 Action Fund? What'd you start? What are you doing? Why?
We're a landing spot for the exhausted majority. And we know there's a lot of people out there really in both parties, especially post-Trump, that are just looking for a home. They know everything's broken, the economy's broken, the political system's broken. I think everything's been scrambled, and people are looking for a place to land. So We the People 250 is for us to acknowledge that we're coming up on the 250-year anniversary of the country. We are lucky we've made it this far on multiple occasions across the way. And we're here to honor that and say, look, if you're exhausted, you got a home with us. Let's figure this out. It starts with conversations. Some of the solutions may be liberal, some may be conservative, but we're not even talking to each other, and that's where we got to start.
The last time I talked to you, one of the things I said is, I want to get to a place where it's not about red hat or blue hat. It's about hard hat. It's about getting to work and rebuilding this country and moving forward together to where, with liberty and justice for all, is possible.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a guy in Youngstown, Ohio, and you do what Donald Trump has done, like you're dead in the water, I mean, but if you're an elite, you're a billionaire, you're famous, you've had TV shows, you're, a president, you can get away with stuff. And that's just when we did the ad about, justice for all, that's got to mean something. And I think most people in the country feel that way. And regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump, you got to look 4 states, 90 some, and it counts. I mean, it's like, come on, man. Like, can you imagine this is how you and I would talk about this. Like, your buddy comes to you and says, oh my God, I think I've been screwed. They rigged it, whatever. You got charged with something. And you're like, well, man, I'm sorry to hear that. And then, well, in another state.
Yeah, I got charged 91 times, but, hey, 191.
Yeah, wait a minute. And then another state, you're like, okay, bro, you're not allowed over the house anymore. Like, stay away from the kids.
Exactly. And this is where I come back to what's happened to this country. We've been put into our camps where, if you're wearing a red hat, you're not seeing any of this stuff and you're not even paying attention to it because it doesn't fit into your neatly constructed ideological narrative. And the same thing on the extreme left. I'm not leaving them out of this, but with Trump, it is this kind of confirmation bias that has really put us on the curbs or on the sidewalks, if you will, when all the action should be happening in the middle of the street.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about workers. Whether you're white or black or brown or gay or straight, if you're out there busting your ass every single day, you need to be at the center of our economic system. And that's just not whether you're talking about the Fed, whether you're talking about supply side economics, with deregulation, the boom and bust cycles that have been going on since the early 1980s. Like, that has killed the working class. And you've seen it in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We've seen it, in Youngstown, Ohio. And the thing is, you realize at one point, boy, there's a hell of a lot of places in this country that look a lot like Harrisburg, PA, and Youngstown, Ohio, than like the suburbs of some, other big city where everybody's doing really, really well. And what you and I and others, I think, have to do, and what we're trying to do, we the people, is try to unite those groups and say, boy, we got a hell of a lot more in common than we do as our differences. And how do we bring this whole thing together?
I talk about it all the time. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. If you ever flew into Hopkins Airport, back in the early 70s and mid 70s, you flew over my house. And I said, look, the reality is as a young kid, I saw a neighbor get a job at Ford. And their lives got better immediately. They had food at the end of the month, eventually got a secondhand car, eventually moved out of the projects altogether. Union job, better life was ingrained in me as a small child. And I see what's going on right now at the Big Three in this contract that I don't know if you've seen the details, but this is really good stuff that I hope is going to put not just auto workers on the right path, but the entire working class back towards prosperity to where work is rewarded. So for me, today is kind of a big day.
Unbelievable. I mean, just reading the top line and obviously the details, will come in the following days. $42 an hour, bro. I mean, $42 an hour. That's $84,000 a year. That is a working class, middle class wage that you've been screaming about for years. I've been screaming about for years. And the profits of the company will not be diminished all that much. But yet everybody who works for them is going to, if you have a spouse that works and makes 40 or 50 grand a year, and you're making 80 some grand a year, probably before overtime, you're at $120,000, $130,000 a year. Now you've got your head above water. Not that you're, burning money, but you have a solid middle class life, you may be able to take your kid to a Browns game or a Steelers game or a football game or a Buckeyes game or
nobody's allowed to take their kids to a Steelers game ever.
and so but that's it, isn't it? I mean, like, you just want to be able to have those moments with your kids, a vacation every year or two. You know, you go to the beach, you see the world, and you're giving your kids something special. And that's all this is about. And I just think, like, we're not asking for all that much. These guys don't want yachts. They don't want to fly themselves to the moon. They just want a good living, and they're going to put a hard day's work in for that. So this is a monumental thing.
Yep.
And I hope it reminds everybody how important the union movement in the United States has always been. And it's going to continue to, I think, perpetuate the building of the middle class.
Now, where I started today's program is talking about, look, it's a historic contract. It's great. But the part for me that I think is important, and maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you'll come along with this, is the fact that they were demanding a 32-hour work week. Now, they knew they were never getting that. But the fact that they're they're the first group to put this out there and for people to grab onto. I'm looking at this as, kind of like the mid-1800s. Where people were talking about a 10-hour and eventually an 8-hour workday, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what you will. The business community, major backlash back then. It was met with ridicule and all kind of stuff until the working class grabbed onto it and said, hey, how come we can't just work 8 hours a day? And I'm hoping that happens now where people go, hey, how come we can't just work 32 hours a week at the same rate that we're working 40 and spend more time with our family, spend more time for what we will, as opposed to having to labor while technological gains are happening at incredible rates and the wealthy are getting wealthier while we're stagnating and actually declining.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to ask our workers to be smarter, work smarter, which they will, and they'll learn the skills. And here comes AI, and here comes these other things. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, you look at our society across the board, and you see deaths of despair, you see depression, you see addiction, you see the suicide rate. There's a level of hopelessness out there. And what are the things that actually, and there's a level of disconnection, what are the things that actually make you feel alive? If you're in a very important job and you're aligned with your mission in life, you consider yourself pretty lucky. But most people are out there, doing a job hopefully they like, and making a wage and have a retirement and some security. But what's the most important thing? Your family, your friends, your community.
Yep. And
so, I've traveled, last couple years running around the state of Ohio in the Senate race, and I met so many people, right? They were working 6-7 days a week, 12 hours a day. It sucks the life out of you. You're barely making a wage, and you never see your spouse. You end up getting divorced. Your kids, you get completely disconnected from your kids. What the hell are we talking about here? This is about being connected to the people you love the most and who love you the most. And you should be able to bust your rear end for 32, 40 hours a week, make a good wage, and be able to spend the rest of your time doing the things that really matter.
Well, so that thing we grew up with, and we're about the same age. We grew up, when you work hard, play by the rules, you get ahead. That
Right.
should be the reality for every working person in this country. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Tim Ryan, former Ohio congressman and founder of the We the People 250 Action Fund. You can find their website, wethepeople250.us. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at this. Now, I come back to this idea of working hard, playing by the rules, and getting ahead. And as you pointed out, with a decent income, maybe with 2 incomes you could get by. My grandparents, they got by on 1 income. Sadly, we're in an era, and I believe this, and I don't know if you'll agree with me, but we're in an era right now where we need 3 incomes, Tim. People are falling that far behind, and you look at states across this country that are gutting child labor laws because we got to get kids back to work because, hey, families need income. We're at an insane moment where I'm hoping this UAW victory awakens a sleeping giant of a working class that has been abused for so long that eventually they say, you know what, we too have had enough.
Yeah, it's when the wages have gone down, and we saw workforce participation rates get down into the mid 60s, even the low 60 percentile, because work didn't pay. and we've been talking about this since Bill Clinton, like make work pay. If you're going to give tax cuts, give them to working people. And you will find that if people are making a good wage, they will go to work, and they will work because they want a better life for themselves. It's human nature. And so, but the problem is we build an economy from pretty much 1980, late 70s, early 80s, and then the whole supply side economic thing was everything was about finance. We moved away from manufacturing. We moved away from building things. It went to finance. Then it turned into tax cuts for rich people and trickle down economics. And it completely screwed, and I normally say another word, especially at 9:45 at night, but completely screwed working class people, whether you were white or black or brown, a man or a woman. And so what we're trying to do, and I think Biden has to get some credit for this, reindustrializing the United States. That's the CHIPS Act. That's the infrastructure bill. That's the Inflation Reduction Act. That was all about reindustrializing the United States of America, building shit again in this country. And now we're getting there. And so that's important. And that's why we have an opportunity to rebuild the middle class. Because when you get to manufacturing, you get to unionization, you get to higher wages, you get to what the UAW is doing. And why do they have all that leverage? They have all that leverage because they are now front and center in industries of the future around batteries, around electric vehicles, and all this other stuff. Now they got some leverage, and they're putting a flag in the ground, and God bless them. And there's a lot, let me say too real quick, Rick. There was a lot of people who left closed factories, like in Lordstown, Ohio, and they had to go to Toledo. They went to Fort Wayne, Indiana. They went to Detroit. They had to leave their homes. They're commuting back and forth. They left their kids. They left their spouses to keep their job because they had 5 more years till their retirement. That's a pissed off group of people saying this, enough's enough. And I think that fuel is what gave, I think, the impetus to this strike having so much kind of robustness to it.
But this is, again, the reason that I'm such a big fan of what Joe Biden's done. And look, I understand the working person who said, hey, we're going to give Donald Trump a try, because he did grab my family. And look, I've said it before, my family is basically the basket of deplorables. They've always been all of those horrible things. It's the reality of living in a very segregated era that they lived in. But they never voted. They were never, none of those things, racism, misogyny, homophobia, none of that got them to the polls. What got them to the polls is Donald Trump telling them he's going to revive Brook Park Avenue. We're bringing back all those jobs at Ford and those feeder plants that fed into that lifestyle that they were afforded because they had good, solid wage income, union jobs that made their lives better. That's what they heard. And he did not deliver, never had a plan or had a chance of delivering on it, and really didn't. It was about the rhetoric, but that's what they bought, Tim. And I think you know that as well as anybody else.
Yeah, and they had, I met same group, Rick. I mean, we grew up in the same kind of place, same kind of people. And I've had a lot of Democrats, rank and file union members, when Trump got in, they said, I waited a long time to vote for somebody like this. He said all the right things. He struck all the right chords. But, the reality of it is he didn't reindustrialize the country. He had, 104 infrastructure weeks. And never got anything done. He's not talking about building stuff. He tried to nuance the union thing, right? Even with this current strike, he couldn't quite figure out how he was going to play that politically. You stand with the unions. You stand with working people, whether they're union or non-union. Yep. What's so hard about that? And so he did not deliver. And to try to penetrate through but it does signal how people feel about the Democratic Party right now, which you and I, who are Democrats, I know I am, that we got to acknowledge that there's a real issue here with working class people saying, man, I know I don't like Trump, but geez, oh Pete, the Democrats aren't talking my language. And
to be fair, Tim, if I can stop here, to be fair, look, there's a lot of reasons for working people to look at the Democrats with a little jaundiced eye. I mean, you go back to Carter was going to undo Taft-Hartley. Bill Clinton got me to vote for him because strike replacement was going to happen. And I shook Obama's hand twice, and he told me we were getting something better than EFCA. Got none of them out of anyone. So it's not surprising that people are a little off. I'm now looking at Jelly Bucket Joe going, hey, here's a guy who talked the talk literally walking the walk on a picket line in Detroit, whereas Obama told me he was going to get his comfortable shoes and get out there. Biden actually found those comfortable shoes.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. But we got to acknowledge that. Like, it's like that, when people are saying, do I go with the insurrectionists or do I go with the Democrats? And that's even a choice to where we lost the House and barely kept the Senate and Biden barely won. Like, that is such a deep-rooted problem that I do fear that there are Democrats in the Beltway who just aren't getting the depth of misunderstanding and the disconnect in our party. And that, if you don't acknowledge that, Rick, we're never going to make any progress. Somebody's got to say, I get it. I get it. At least start there and then try to rehabilitate. But my fear is that we aren't going to rehabilitate the image. I do think, if we're speaking frank here, because you and I are buddies, like, people aren't feeling good about the economy. All of this stuff happening. I voted for it all. I support it all. It's the greatest reindustrialization in America, but people aren't feeling it yet. You can't tell them they're feeling better than they're feeling. It's not a recipe for success. And so I just, as a friend and an ally, caution my party to say, you better get this right, because people aren't feeling it on the street. And I live in Ohio, and you're a working class guy who rubs elbows with working class people too. They're just not feeling it.
Right.
And so you got to come up with something better, no, I'm really telling you you're doing better. And you say, no, I'm not. You say, yes, you are. It just doesn't work that way.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think, again, what we're seeing on the UAW line, I think the fact that, they're fighting for those wage increases because the profits are there. I mean, we could argue why the economy is going the direction it is. I wish we would have today's Harry Truman or Teddy Roosevelt to go after corporate profits and monopolies and all that. I'm still hoping for it. But, I think unions are the way to level the playing field, get people the wage increases that are going to make their lives better. And I do see some of that happening. I do got to get your thoughts on a couple of things before you run. Ohio, big election coming up on Ohio on issue 1 and issue 2. Issue 1 is the abortion issue. Issue 2 is the legalizing marijuana issue. I guess the right response is yes is good, no is bad. And the disinformation campaign, wow, I've been reading some crazy stuff coming out of your state.
Yeah, no question about it. To me, really, both of these issues are about freedom. You want to talk about freedom. It's whether or not the government's going to be in your bedroom. Here's the thing on the issue 1 with the abortion issue is that if this does not pass, Ohio will have the absolute most restrictive abortion laws in the entire country.
Right.
I mean, your daughter, young daughter, 13-year-old daughter, could get raped, get pregnant, and there would be no recourse in the state of Ohio for that situation to be dealt with in a mature, thoughtful way.
And what it does also is it creates desperation. And look, I've said this a million times on the abortion issue. I personally am not in favor of abortion. Then again, as an old white guy, I'm never going to have one. I'm on the pro-safety side of things. I don't want my daughters having to go into back alleys like their grandmother's generation had to do to get the care that they need. So for me, I'm pro-safety above all else. So to have it safe, legal, that to me is paramount. All the other stuff is just noise in my view.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't think anybody thinks that abortion should be used as birth control or anything like that. This is about these situations that the government has they can't get into every single circumstance. So just leave it to the woman, let her make the decision. And let's move on. This is huge government interference in the lives of average people, women who, last I checked, were citizens of the country and have rights. If this was an issue about taking these rights away from men, I think there'd be a whole different conversation that we're having in the country. But you have to give women, you have to trust them to make the decision that's appropriate for them. And I think the same with the marijuana. I mean, we've got so many young people and people generally in prison obviously tilted towards the black community, the brown community, in prison for basic marijuana crimes. It's insanity, paying billions and billions of dollars of money that we could be reinvesting back into education, skilled training, shop class, healthcare, prevention, infrastructure, all of these things that we need to invest money in. We're spending it in the most absurd way, keeping young people in behind bars for marijuana crimes. I mean, this goes back to Nixon, goes back to those years of the war on drugs. And look, people are adults. They can make their own decisions. One thing with kids, but if you're an adult and you want to smoke some weed, who gives a shit? Like, let's be honest. Like, don't hurt anybody. Don't drive. Don't, all these other safety precautions. But my goodness gracious, $40,000, $50,000 a year for somebody who's, smoking a little bit of weed. I think society's moved well beyond that. We've got bigger fish to fry. Just look around the country, right? Do we have bigger fish to fry than someone smoking a joint? Yeah. I mean, come on. Get the government out of our business. Let's deal with the big structural economic issues, these foreign policy issues, retirement, pensions, all these things. That's where the focus needs to be, not on this dumb stuff.
Yeah, we got lots that we could spend all day on and talk about. I love having you. The website, wethepeople250.us. How can people participate? What can people do? What's the help here?
Yeah, come on in. We're going to highlight, Rick. It's a great organization. We want, again, the exhausted majority, but we're going to highlight the solutions that are out there that get no oxygen in the current environment. How psilocybin is healing vets. How cannabinoids and cannabis are healing addiction, how food as medicine is reversing chronic disease and lowering healthcare costs, how regenerative ag can sequester carbon and get us healthier food, resuscitate rural America. Like the cool things that are actually working in the country that aren't like the polarizing issues. Come to We the People. We're going to have these discussions. We're going to highlight it, talk about it. We want a representative in every county in the United States. And we're going to build a great organization that's going to help celebrate America. So we'd love to have, I know your audience is a lot of people who care about America and want to participate. So come to We the People. And Rick, you're more than welcome. I'll waive your fee to get in, man. You're like, come on in. We want you.
No, I love the idea of talking about issues that our corporate-controlled mainstream media doesn't spend time on. Because, look, again, I go back to that frame. It's about red hat, blue hat. We got to have the race. We got to have the fight. It's got to be this competition of who wins and who loses, not how do we make lives better. And for me, true north is how do we make working people's lives better? What policies can we act? What direction do we take? For me, it's that simple.
You're on it. The fight is against inequality. Right. The fight is against poverty. The fight is against, people not having a secure retirement. That's the fight, not against each other. Those are the challenges that we have. So let's get on with it.
I got 30 seconds left. I want to get your thoughts on the new speaker. Any inside thoughts on Speaker Johnson?
I don't know the man. I mean, it sounds like he's fallen into the real extreme wing of the extremists there. So we'll see what happens. But you have to govern, and putting your hand on the Bible, especially as Speaker of the House, members of Congress, committee chairs, your job is to serve the people, and that means making compromise and moving the ball down the field, providing stability for our businesses and our workforce. So you can't come in holding the Bible and saying, if you don't agree with everything in the Bible, I'm not going to agree with you.
There
you got to make peace, and you got to make deals.
Good stuff. Tim, I appreciate the time. Kind of We the People stuff. The website, wethepeople250.us. Quick break, right back after this. Thanks again, Tim.
It was absolutely remarkable to see how fast Hurricane Otis became a monster Category 5.
Powerful Hurricane Otis slams into Mexico and the history books. International Energy Agency predicts fossil fuel demand will peak by 2030, plus...
The climate is changing, but the question is the climate changing because of natural cycles in the atmosphere, or is it changing because we drive SUVs?
New Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson is a climate science denier.
Of course. How do you think he got the job? All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The problem with the climate change debate is that there are facts on both sides. And there's no okay.
Sounds like your constituents love you, Mike Johnson. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, there are facts apparently on both sides of the climate change issue. Try telling that to the folks in Acapulco today.
Yeah, that one escalated quickly. Hurricane Otis struck Acapulco early Wednesday as a devastating Category 5 with a powerful storm surge inundating the resort city. As we go to air, initial reports indicate widespread damage. Otis made history as the strongest hurricane on record ever to hit Mexico and the first Category 5 on record for this section of the eastern Pacific. Fueled by abnormally warm ocean waters of 87 degrees, Otis is the fourth hurricane in 3 weeks to hit Mexico's west coast. Mexico also has been suffering from a persistent record heat wave over the past 5 months.
We have seen this rapid intensification of storms like Otis really all season long. It's happening more and more, and we even talked about it when we referenced Tropical Storm Otis just about a day ago.
Yeah, Hurricane Otis is the latest hurricane to undergo rapid intensification. It surprised forecasters by rocketing from tropical storm status to a Category 5 in just 12 hours.
12 hours.
Giving coastal residents little time to prepare. And studies have established a clear link between man-made global warming, hotter oceans, and more frequent and severe rapid intensification of hurricanes. A study earlier this week confirmed that Atlantic storms are rapidly intensifying more frequently than in the past.
Well, there are facts on both sides. Am I right, Mike Johnson?
In politics, the oil and gas industry is likely very happy that Republican Congressman Mike Johnson from the oil and gas state of Louisiana was elected by Republicans to be the new Speaker of the House on Wednesday in a victory for the chamber's far-right MAGA caucus. Johnson is a climate science denier who also has tried to roll back the Endangered Species Act.
Oh, nice of him.
Johnson has received more campaign cash from the oil and gas industry than from any other industry since its election to Congress in 2016.
Well, he ain't seen nothing yet.
Meanwhile, Big Oil is doubling down on extracting more fossil fuels that drive human-caused climate change. Days after ExxonMobil announced it was acquiring a Texas fracking company for more than $60 billion, Chevron this week announced it is buying Hess Corporation for $53 billion, including major stakes in projects in Guyana and elsewhere. Analysts say industry consolidation and the acquisition of new reserves indicate that the oil industry is betting that U.S. government policies won't curb fossil fuels in any major way and that demand for oil and gas will remain high into the 2030s.
Mission accomplished. So these oil companies who claim to be concerned about climate change going to do something about their emissions, what they're doing is increasing them.
Yeah, and it may be a bad bet on demand. The famously cautious International Energy Agency predicted this week, for the first time ever, that demand for climate-warming oil, gas, and coal will soon peak and then fall by 2030. In its annual World Energy Outlook, the IEA says the energy transition is speeding up due to surging growth of clean energy technologies and electric vehicles, and in part to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. IEA Director Fatih Birol said in a statement, quote, "The transition to clean energy is happening worldwide and is unstoppable. It is not a question of if, it is a matter of how soon." Here's IEA Chief Energy Economist Tim Gould.
You often hear that the global energy mix is big, it's difficult to move, but shifts do happen, and they can happen quite quickly.
Yeah, shifts happen.
The IEA projects that solar energy will be the dominant source of electricity by 2030 with existing government policies. However, the report warns that current policies won't be fast enough to avoid accelerating climate impact. So the IEA calls for a tripling of renewable energy and a doubling of energy efficiency efforts by 2030.
Keep calling. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, we've been seeing a lot of interesting messaging coming out around Social Security. And you know, I was just reading through this article. You know, one of these opinion pieces that gets picked up, and I forget it. Washington Post, New York Times, it was one of them. And it grabbed my attention in that the headline was, you know, for the good of the country, you know, older Americans should work more and take less. This was the argument that they were making, you know, saying, look, you know, in the old days, you know, people didn't live that long. You know, now people are living, you know, into their 80s and 90s and retiring as early as 62. And they went through this whole very well thought out, very well constructed argument. And look, you know, our Social Security and Medicare systems do need to be updated in a way that makes them solvent. And I've had people say, see, this is why we need to do what the Republicans want to do, and that's cut. You know, raise the retirement age to 70 or 75, or, you know, as one congressman said, you know, people want to work well past 75. And maybe there are a handful of people that want to do that. Maybe there are. But the majority of working people who take a shower at the end of the day, people whose hands are like mine, calloused and dirty most of the time, they're looking towards that 62, 65, 67 as, can I get there? Will my body hold out long enough? Will my knees and my back, will I be able to keep up? And employers don't want older workers, you know, doing those jobs either, because they're not as productive as younger people. Look, older workers are going to be smarter, more efficient. They're going to figure out, but that only goes so far, especially when you're talking about a 70-year-old guy, you know, laying brick. There may be a couple out there, but for the mass of people, move them into retirement age. Well, they're making this argument, and throughout the whole article, you know, they're making good points. Look, you know, people are living longer. They're getting more out than they paid in, and you know, we need to figure this out. And you know, they even on one line even brought up the the idea of, you know, maybe we, you know, have to talk about raising taxes on rich people. It was a quick line, and they quickly, you know, brushed right past it. But then they get to the end, and this is the part that again, you know, it's interesting to me how these things always seem to pit people against each other. It's never about, hey, how for the good of, because they're calling to older Americans for the good of the country, sacrifice, tighten the belt. The final line of this article, and if you want to take a look at it, it's titled, "For the Good of the Country, Older Americans Should Work More and Take Less." The final little paragraph reads, and I quote, "Younger Americans must help lead this transformation. Because every year reform is delayed, they and future generations will receive less support during their working and child-raising years, just as their parents and grandparents did on important issues. It's time for them to speak out and step up." And you go, this is divide and conquer. This is pitting young people against old people. This is what got us into this mess. The wealthy, they're not really talked about. Out of a 800-word article, tax the wealthy was tax the wealthy. 3 words. The rest was, how can working people struggle more? How can working people sacrifice? How could the good of the country should you take less? And I'm going, I'm sorry. I'm not going to put Granny back on cat food. I don't want Granny having to divide up her medications and only take half a pill today to make it last a little longer. That's not in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization at its wealthiest moment. Sorry, not happening. But this divide and conquer, this is kind of the amazing thing that they get away with all the time, because they want you to focus on, here's the argument. This is it. Binary choice. We do nothing and it implodes and everyone dies, or you working people sacrifice. There's nothing in the middle that we can talk about. And look, there's plenty of things that we can and should be doing. First of them being scrap the cap. Sorry. And it should not just be earned income. We should be passive in portfolio income. It should be bank. It should be every bit of income that rich people get, that it's taxed on, just like working people. 100% of it. But that's not fair. Yes, it is. Because understand what Social Security is. It's not a retirement program. It was never meant that. It's an anti-poverty insurance program. Sometimes you pay into insurance and you don't get your money out. It's for the betterment of society. And sometimes you pay into insurance and you get more out. That's the nature of the game. But this is one of those moments where corporate America is making out wildly. And understand, what's happening to Social Security was not even mentioned in this. That now you've got over 40% of the working people in this country who aren't paying in because they're gig workers. I know they're self-employed. No, they're gig workers. They're working for a corporation who 20 years ago would have been their employee. But now, because they've figured out how to game the system, now no one's paying into this stuff. And it is struggling. And there are problems. But killing it does not save it. And I love the argument, we got to kill it to save it. No, if you kill it, you've killed it. It's dead. It doesn't help anyone. You can't save something dead. And I've been seeing a lot of this talk. There's been a lot of it. In fact, I was on social media, and this is the weirdest thing. I don't know the algorithm, because I get I look at motorcycle videos. My son and I, I'm looking for Tail of the Dragon videos where I can go and me and the boy can ride next year. And I'm seeing Social Security stuff. And there's a guy, and I don't know his name, but he works for the Dave Ramsey. And he's talking about how your union workers, they demand things, and union workers, who do they think they are? All this kind of insanity. And you go, maybe you've never heard of unions. Maybe you've never heard of negotiations. The thing that they didn't mention in this argument is the thing that, Ramsey's, guy doesn't seem to get. You know how we save Social Security? Get people with higher wages. People with higher wages pay higher Social Security tax. It's one of those things that I keep coming back to. They always ask us, take a little more, take one for the team, sacrifice a little more. And yet it never filters up. You know what does trickle down? Pain and suffering and sacrifice. You never see the people at the top going, yep, I'm going to take one for the team. At least I haven't. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are you?
Totally insane. So I too have noticed this, and I thought to myself, oh gee, this is the Republicans' new way of trying to get rid of Social Security. But the thing that I really was also thinking was, for a party that's supposed to be pro-life, like they, just scream it at us all the time, we're all for guns and babies and Jesus, and, we're pro-life, and everybody else is demon spawn. They sure want to sacrifice the older people. I mean, if you recall, Greg Abbott during COVID was already, hey, Grandpap and Grandma should just die to, keep the economy open. And it's just amazing to me that their base, well, even though a lot of them are uneducated and unable to have critical thinking skills and reasoning, you would think that it would at least be a wake-up call to go, wait a minute, you want to get rid of Grandpap and Grandma and my Social Security? It's just amazing.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
And look, as I've said a million times, this is not new. You want to make lives better? Really, you want to make lives better? Higher wages. That's how we do it. Better wages, hours, conditions. That's simple. Share the wealth. Simple. Perfect example. The economy is doing much better. Unemployment rates at historic lows. We're seeing, wages going up. And, as Tim Ryan said a bit ago, people aren't really internalizing it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the media that we're consuming. I think they're being told for some, life's hard for everybody. Inflation's killing us. And yet somehow, most people that I know, they're doing okay. They're griping about the prices they're paying, but the wages are starting to pick up. So life is getting better. Now, I found it interesting. The LA Times ran a story talking about the murder rate in this country. Evidently, and again, wouldn't know this watching Fox News, wouldn't know this, watching any of our news coverage. But according to the LA Times, the homicide rate in this country in 2022 dropped significantly and has plummeted faster this year than any time on record, putting the country on track for one of the biggest declines in killing ever recorded. We're down here. Crime statistics have shown the murder rate is way down, yet public perception, you talk to a conservative, you talk to a red hat, there's murder on every corner. MS-13's coming for everyone. And I look at this, and we're in this place where, we've got a media structure that's so hell-bent on keeping eyeballs glued or ears glued to whatever medium that they're just out and out lying most of the time. They're making stuff up. Now, of course, Fox News isn't really news. It's entertainment. Tucker Carlson, very clear about that. But at what point do we go, this is harmful for the country? This kind of lying and this kind of insanity. Because remember, they told us recession's coming. Every day they've been telling us recession's coming, recession any day now. The economy is in the toilets. Recession is coming. And yet the economy is doing fairly well. And I know Joe Biden broke another promise by not having a recession or some nonsense. But the reality is things are moving in the right direction. We're reshoring manufacturing. We're investing in infrastructure. We're doing solid, positive, good things, but would not know it listening to the corporate-controlled mainstream media. Because it's not in their interest. It's not in their interest to say Biden's doing a good job. It's not in their interest to, the story like I talked about a minute ago, for an older guy, Joe Biden is, really forward thinking. And you go, yeah, that's what I want. I want somebody who's going to go, hey, I have a vision for the future. I have a path to make lives better. And he wants his legacy to be that of someone who made lives better. So it's going to be interesting to see where we go. I want to hear your thoughts, though. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So according to Goldman Sachs, the rich people, Goldman Sachs, evidently, they have removed their forecast for a government shutdown. And look, maybe this is a good thing. But they said, given this new geopolitical risks and the election of the Speaker of the House, they've removed it for the short term. Now, 2024, whole different story. That understand the good Christian Mike Johnson doesn't want to screw up Christmas. Doesn't want to go against feeding the hungry and kicking people out of their homes at Christmas time when they're celebrating the birth of Jesus. Can't have that. But the day after Christmas, which is like a pink slip time of the year, he's all in favor of that, I would assume. Now I do find it interesting that they have thrown what was a little fish into a giant pond, and the media folk are on a feeding frenzy. They are going full tilt boogie after this guy who, evidently no one decided to do the Oppo research on his background. I know you run for Congress, someone's supposed to do that, but in a district like his where his opponent had no resources to actually, do any of this research, you kind of get away with it. When you step into the national stage, when you are 2 heartbeats away from being president, that brings a whole nother level of scrutiny. And now we're finding out all of the crazy, all of the insane, all of the things that that Mike Johnson has said and done. And at 25, he evidently adopted a black child, a 14-year-old, which some people are saying a little creepy. I don't know. I'm not making any judgments because I don't know the facts, but it is interesting. The fact that he took down his website. Scrubbed his website, basically scrubbed his online presence. Him and his wife evidently did 69 podcasts. Evidently did the 69 podcasts and took those down. But, again, on the internet, never goes away. Someone did archive them. They are available for download. So you can hear all of the insanity that the couple, decided to spew. And his wife, basically took her website down for her Onward Christian Counseling Services business the day after HuffPost, pointed out that there were, things on the site that compared homosexuality to bestiality and incest. Probably not the best thing for the speaker to have, I don't know, his wife running around saying. And then there's the video, from 2017 of him basically saying that mass shootings are not because of guns. No. It's because of feminism. It's because of no-fault divorce, legalized abortion. That's what it's really about. Yeah. And look, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, here's the thing. This is where my mind goes. Because, again, I don't like being shoveled this kind of, he's the Antichrist or he's the hero. I'm sure he's bad. And I'm sure, some people see him as good. I see him being thrown out and sacrificed as a diversion. And you go, what do you mean, Rick? How could that possibly be? Nothing's getting done. There's going to be nothing that passes out of the House that's going to make it through the Senate. There's going to be no legislative action coming out of this House of Representatives. It's all going to be virtual signaling. It's all going to be that kind of, hey, vote for us in 24 because we got bad ideas. And our bad ideas are going to be, how can we punish the others? That's all we're getting. But I think Republicans may have, and maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but here's a guy who's toxic. His positions are out of the mainstream of this country. You know, the country is not far right or far left. I argue for the most part, when you talk to people, we are center left. People believe in social programs. People believe in helping the poor. People believe in welfare and the right to choose and public education and all of the things that the right is totally against. The country's on board with. They're on board with a functional government that solves problems. And yet you've got a Republican Party who, one, hates working people, and two, wants to destroy our government. Why? So the wealthy can get wealthier. And they are wildly wealthier. But I think they threw this guy out there knowing that corporate America was going to do what corporate America does. The mainstream corporate-controlled media, all of the bottom feeder media, presence, they're all going to look for the most divisive, horrible stuff. Clicks and views. All of the bunch of clickbaiters out there. And this guy gives everyone the red meat. So if you're on the right, he's a hero. He's fighting for family values, and he's fighting for all of their, again, this stuff that they don't really believe in, but it makes for good messaging. Or they don't believe it for themselves. They want to impose it on everyone else. And they know that the left is going to go, chumming after all of the divisive stuff. And we're going to end up just fighting each other and bickering and eating each other while not noticing that we still have hungry children. In fact, child hunger doubled thanks to Republican policies. Thank you. And Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. We still have homeless veterans. We still have major problems in this country. People who don't have health care, people who don't have access to nutritional food, people who don't have the ability to retire even though they want to destroy Social Security. There are real problems, and real big ones that take real statesmen and women to come and decide on. We don't have that. So what we need bread and circus. We need entertainment. We need diversion. And that's what I think Mike Johnson brings us. He's the chew toy for the ideologues. He's the guy who, we're going to find out some really horrible stuff. Trust me, if there's something in that closet, it will be found. When you step that close to the kind of power that he is now close to, they will find it. You can't bury anything deep enough. Ask Denny Hastert. He tried. And I had someone tell me today, he's going to be the next Denny Hastert. You wait. I'm going, I don't know. I hope for whoever the victim would have been, that's not accurate. But who knows? My problem still is, how do we get things done? How do we solve the problems that are very real? Because understand, as I said, kids are still going to bed hungry. Granny's got to worry if she's going back on cat food. Workers are still struggling to make ends meet. Families are working 2-3 jobs. And there doesn't seem to be anyone in our political world that's allowed to push forward on solutions. Now, again, I give Biden credit. The fact of the matter is he's trying. And truly, I believe he has earned a second term. Because I want to see what's next. And I think not only has he earned a second term, but he's earned a second term with the Democratic House and Senate. Because what they have done masterfully, is they've shown us that they can lead. They've shown us that they can get policy done, even with a tight window. And I think they can move us in a direction that makes lives better. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick
Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1929. On that Wednesday morning, people across the United States woke up to newspaper headlines informing them that something had gone horribly wrong on Wall Street the day before. Black Tuesday, as the day came to be known, had capped off a devastating drop in the market that had begun with the great crash the prior Thursday. $25 billion was lost in the crash, which would be about $300 billion in today's money. The crash helped spark the Great Depression that saw unemployment soar to 25% and nearly half of the banks in the United States fail. But the day after the crash, the news reports were not all doom and gloom. While Variety declared in big bold letters, "Wall Street lays an egg," other headlines struck a different tone. The New York Times wordy headline stated, quote, "Stocks collapse in 16,410,000 30-share day, but rally at close cheers brokers. Bankers optimistic to continue aid." The Chicago Tribune went with the more concise, "Stock slump ends in rally." Newspaper reporters attempted to explain the crash. The Denver Post blamed the downturn on gamblers. The Philadelphia Evening Ledger blamed the propagandists of gloom and economic terror. And the New York Times blamed the reckless Wall Street speculators. But many papers also attempted to quell panic over the bad news from New York. The Kansas City Star assured readers that once the adjustment is completed, the country will move forward to new levels of prosperity. The Nashville Banner similarly predicted the reaction had to come, and the country will be better off for the lesson it has had, costly though it be. That costly lesson became a devastating global depression.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Wow. A couple of Supreme Court judges say they're starting to think that maybe the court should sort of start thinking about possibly, perhaps, someday adopting some sort of anti-corruption reforms. This tiny group of unelected, supremely powerful judges is allowed to make its own rules of ethical behavior. So, surprise, they've chosen to have no code of conduct like all other top officials are expected to obey. Unsurprisingly then, the justices feel free to accept financial payments, bribes, from moneyed interests seeking favorable legal rulings from the supposedly impartial court. But, oops, the general public has begun to notice the corruption, and public belief in the court's integrity has plummeted. Thus, one of the far-right Supremes, Amy Coney Barrett, is now supporting a vague veil of an ethics code for her colleagues, even as she attests that all are, quote, very committed to the highest standards of ethical conduct. Seriously? Including the notorious money sleaze Clarence Thomas? But wait, even a progressive justice, Elena Kagan, joins in the charade that an ethical code might produce, well, ethics, or at least political cover for the lack thereof. A code, she surmises, would, quote, go far in persuading other people that we are adhering to the highest standards of conduct. Hello? Would you be persuaded? Yet, these Supremes won't even take this minimal step of adopting a simple code to measure basic integrity. It would be a good idea for us to do it, Barrett meekly says. It would be a good thing for the court to do that, Kagan echoes. This is Jim Hightower saying, stop it. Stop the pitiful posturing. There's only 9 of you. You're in charge. Convene a happy hour, confront reality, and do the right thing. Just do it. I'll buy the beer.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, interesting story. Evidently, X, formerly known as Twitter, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, it was worth $44 billion. That's what he paid for it. And some argued it was worth probably even a little more than that. But according to an internal memo, they're arguing it's now worth just about $19 billion. So he lost more than half of the money he put on Twitter. Now, again, I argue wasn't his money. Got it from other people so that he could destroy Twitter. And he has done a fabulous job of destroying what Twitter was. But, yeah, it shows rich people don't, it's not about money, it's about control and power. because some of the things that he's been doing, questionable at best. Free speech, not so much. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Big trial going on, you might have noticed, all going on. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So, the big trial, evidently Ivanka Trump is now, she's going to testify. Originally tried to get out of it, probably not going to happen.
Right. In fact, I thought originally that she would be out of it because there were some news stories, that she may possibly not be brought in. But now it's been delayed in the civil fraud trial. So I think, it will be delayed until Monday. Wait a minute. She was supposed to take the stand, Friday?
Right. But now Doug Jr. and Eric are going to do that on Friday.
Right. She's going to appear November the 8th.
Right.
Which will be the around the election. Right. Yeah, she'll appear then. So it'll be interesting to see, what happens with her during that. But originally I thought she would be actually exempt from that.
Yeah, well, but, here's the thing. She was part of the business. So anyone having to do anything with the business, they're going to call to the stand.
Right. There was the decision originally. She was dismissed in June from the lawsuit, and then there was a New York appeals court that said some of the claims regarding her were outdated, but the judge still thought that she had some knowledge. Of course, even if some of the claims were outdated, she had personal knowledge of the individual, which would be Trump, and the defendants.
So we'll be interested to see where this goes.
Right.
Also, we're going to get your thoughts on Mike Pence. Evidently, Pence aborted his campaign. One of the funniest things on Twitter said Pence can't abort the campaign until it's life-threatening. And it's not life-threatening yet.
I think Pence stopped the campaign before the first debate. There was no way that Pence, under any fashion or form, could have continued in the Republican primary because of the things that Trump, obviously said about him, and the fact that he was the one that could have changed the election for the world, according to Trump and his people. So I never thought that he would continue on. Now, I think the next person eventually that there's a couple other ones that will drop out, but I just don't see where DeSantis remains. Nikki Haley, he went down 2 points and she went up from 6 to 16. So they're both at 16%. But the fact that she went up and he went down, I do compare DeSantis, though, to Jeb Bush. During the election, I used to tell this when I do all my radio calls, I would say, turn down the volume and watch Jeb Bush. He looks like he's in agony. Or, Carl made him, get out there.
Yeah.
Carl Rove, get out there, Jeb. Get on that stage right now. And if you look at it, he just didn't want to be there. And DeSantis has the same thing. One of them, you've seen the fake smile video where he smiles and then he goes back to a frown. And he just doesn't look like he, is comfortable up there, or I think he wants to be there. I just don't think he looks comfortable.
But I also just think that's his demeanor. I don't know the man, but every time I see him, that's what he looks like. So I just assume that's his demeanor, when he's happy. He's grimacing even when he's smiling.
Because Vivek Ramaswamy, I know he's on, political steroids, super hyped, etc. but he is a guy that looks like, he really, really does want to be there. He wants to be, but not DeSantis. He just
yeah. So who does Pence now throw his massive support behind? I doubt it's going to be Trump.
Well, whoever, I would say, since it's a Republican primary, whoever he hates. He needs to endorse who he hates.
Yeah, I'll get you back.
Yeah, I'm supporting. I'm endorsing Chris Christie. Yeah, he needs to support who he can't stand.
There you go.
Pence was nowhere.
Now, evidently, you've got these disqualification clause hearings that are beginning in Colorado and Minnesota. Are you on board with the idea of using the courts to disqualify him? I'm really not comfortable with it, because I still think for the good of the country, he has to be defeated soundly at the polls, even if that means the risk that he could be president again. But I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I don't like the process at all, because the process of insurrection, whether you can be a candidate due to going against the United States, or whatever, especially in this case with it being Donald Trump. And I understand that there's been dozens of cases citing the 14th Amendment, and they've been filed, but I think that final decision is a decision of Smith and and the courts as to what happened. There's a court case on it,
right?
And so I think they won't win with these, and so frankly, it gives Trump a lot of publicity that he beat the issue. This type of issue rising to this level is not going to be decided by this system. It's just not. They're trying to bar him under the presidential ballot, and it's just not going to be decided that way. I don't think it's a good idea. I think whoever thought it up politically, forget substance-wise, I think politically they didn't think it through.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people doing things politically that they didn't really think through.
No, they didn't on this one.
But we'll see. Now, interestingly enough, the Justice Department is looking for a 10-year federal prison sentence for one of Trump's appointees who assaulted a police officer on January 6th. Again, I don't know, 10 years doesn't seem like a lot.
Well, in the beginning of this, you and I talked about it, when the first cases were coming down, the court was going light. And at that time, there were hundreds of people. And if the court would not go light, if the system, if the prosecutors were asking the full ride and then the court was going way below that, it sends a message down the system to all those other people. If they were more stern in the ruling from the bench, then there would have been a lot of people that would have made some plea deals. They really would have done that. And especially for some of the things that they did, not just the insurrection part of it, but the fact that, the assault in itself, the assaults were horrific.
Yeah.
And, you could get an assault charge on something else, not trying to break into the Capitol for, frankly, I think a longer time.
But again, we'll see. Now, I keep coming back to, Trump and the trials and all this. And look, we keep giving him so much attention. I mean, it's in fact, now you've got this guy who's now Speaker of the House. Trump gives him the nickname MAGA Mike. Now everywhere you see, the Democrats are going after MAGA Mike. Any thoughts on the new Speaker, Mike Johnson?
Well, he is, certainly somebody that's an enigma in the sense that if you look back on this, people were saying, Jim Jordan's too extreme. And this says a lot about Jim Jordan. He's too extreme. We can't have him. Some of the Republicans said, but then they could have Johnson, who's extreme, but they couldn't have Jordan. It just shows you the internal hypocrisy of the whole situation. I do recognize, though, that Johnson has this style to him, and I read a couple articles. One was on a story where a reporter that had known him in Louisiana, and said he's right wing, right of the right, but his style is not aggressive looking style like Jim Jordan, for example, or another member. So as a result, it cuts him a little bit of a break that he is actually somebody that can say hello to you or communicate to you. But I kind of saw the prayer thing is a big deal, where everybody knelt in prayer in the well of the house, And I was thinking just the other day, if you kneel in prayer in the well of the house, what if somebody had taken prayer rugs and done that?
Yeah.
You think that religious freedom would have rang forth?
No, that's an excellent point. And and again, I'm not against people praying. Just do it the way for generations we did. Go home, kneel down in your bed, and say whatever you need to say.
But here's the thing about Johnson that is the most telling of anything that has happened so far. Not just looking at his personal record or something, or his style that allows him to, soften the Jim Jordan, approach, but the fact of how he answered on national TV when asked about how he was going to conduct business, and his answer was, the Bible. I'm going to make an argument on that for a second, okay? If I'm the reporter, I don't know why the reporter didn't. If he says this is how I operate, and he points, to the Bible, as a reporter, I'm going to say this. Let me ask you this question. Would you think that the good Lord would rather the 1% pay 5 more percent in taxes so that the hungry and homeless and downtrodden could have some financial support? I'd ask that question. If he's going to answer the Bible is how he will conduct himself. This isn't a matter of saying the Bible is my faith, to say what type of person he is. He answered that the Bible, is his answer to the substance of the government problems. I think that in itself was shocking.
No, it's frightening. It's frightening where
sure it is.
Where we've gone, because Jim Jordan, like you pointed out, is someone you just look at and you go, danger. That guy's crazy. He's extreme. He's got that kind of demeanor. This guy normalizes crazy, and I said the day of his vote, I said this guy is going to bring a Christian version of Sharia law to this country that is frightening, and I believe that. I believe that's where these people want to take us, to where it's not just fascism of corporations and government ruling. It's a theocracy. It's a theocratic fascist state that is. I can see, Christian stonings and all of that. And I know that sounds extreme. I know, Rick, you're going too far. But I got to tell you, I know some of these people, and this is where their minds go.
Well, again, it's one thing if when asked the question about how are you going to operate, if you kind of brought it in this way and said, well, by the way, I'm a Christian, so I'm going to attempt to follow that, philosophy. But when it comes to the public policy of the government, I'm going to be this way. I'm balancing the budget or whatever. He answered, "There's my guide." And like I said, I'd like to have been the reporter that would say, "Don't you think Jesus would want the 1% to pay 3% more for the homeless?"
Yeah.
I mean, I would have asked him that question. I would like to see. And then maybe he would have said, "Well, I'm an Old Testament guy." I said, "I don't know."
Okay, so then when do I kill you for wearing that suit made of 2 different fabrics?
Right, with a button on it.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, his answer was, to me, that's the most shocking thing so far. To me.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I said this earlier, and I don't. Maybe you'll disagree with me, but it feels to me like they put him out there because he could get the votes, knowing that he was going to take all the slings and arrows. Someone had to do Oppo research on him to know just, what's in the closet and how extreme he is from mainstream thought. And there's part of me that goes, they threw him out into the, this small fish into the big pond simply to get eaten. Because look, he's 2 heartbeats from the presidency. Of course he's in a different league than running an election against somebody with no resources. And they're going to dig up all of the craziness. And my argument is, and maybe this is where you'll agree or disagree, that's the point. By our media, all in on clickbaiting this guy, we're not paying attention to the failures of the Republican Party to lead in the House. We're not paying attention to the fact that, things aren't getting better for working people because they're so dysfunctional. So I'm curious, any thoughts on that?
I think there's a combination of things here. I mean, I think you're partially correct in that some people have thought this through. That's what you're saying. they thought this through where it's going to end up. Now, I noticed with real great interest, Rick, something he did, and this was fascinating. He came out, and it was an article, I think, in the Hill, I can't remember, but he said he's not afraid to change the rule about vacating the speaker's chair. He said he's not afraid to do it. And then he brought up the fact that, everybody's here in good faith. He brings that up. And that he's going to, be the most transparent guy ever. And he said this, I think it was on the Sunday show. And that he's not afraid to change that rule. And in his way, the way he operates, this is going to not be a hoopla, and it's going to be quiet, and then all of a sudden something's going to happen that they like, and then the rule was just going to, boom, be changed.
Like magic.
Once he does that, you know what power that instantly gives him. The other thing he said, and this goes back to your statement, the other thing he said is that, we could extend this temporary budget till April. Well, McCarthy was thrown out for, doing one. And that tells me that there are people, that's what you said, that have thought this through. I think there's also a group of the members that finally just said, wow, we're dying right before the public. I don't care now if Mickey Mouse becomes the speaker. They didn't care.
I'd have voted for Mickey Mouse.
They knew they were in trouble. They had to do something. But I do think there's a group of them that think exactly what you said. Exactly.
Because every day I'm thinking something's going to come out every day, and someone I saw this story that at 25 he adopted a 14-year-old black kid. So then I got that Hastert vibe in my head. There's just all kinds of who knows what path this ends up on, and I think, and I go back to that's the point. The point is divide and conquer, keep us in red hat, blue hat land to where we're not getting anything done.
But also, any moves against him probably will come by somebody that is desiring the speakership after 2024 if they keep control.
Yeah.
The powder will be kept dry. Yeah, if. Right now they've put themselves in such a mess, they can't afford to have any misstep. Because if the troops are riled up again, wow, it's going to be an ugly place.
Last question I got for you. Ohio's got a big election coming up. Issue 1 and Issue 2, as I understand, voting yes on both Issue 1 and 2, good. Voting no on Issue 1 and 2, bad. Lots of disinformation on both. Any thoughts on the big election coming up?
Yeah, I think with Issue 1, of course, we know, what happened with Issue 1. The Republicans, totally blew that. So I think Issue 1 stands, the best chance to pass versus failing. That was a nightmare how the legislature turned around and tried to have an issue that would then negate the issue coming up. Now the second one was with cannabis, and so I don't know. I haven't followed that one where it's going to go. It would be legalizing recreational marijuana. I'm going to go yes. I think Issue 1 stands a good chance. Issue 2, it's Ohio still. I don't know.
Yeah,
it may not make it. It's Ohio. So,
that is the best phrase. It's Ohio still.
It is. So I'm gonna go with no. I'm a no on Issue 2 and a yes on Issue 1.
There it is from Bob's Bob's lips. Bob, always great talking with you, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. We'll see you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. There you go. It's still Ohio. That should be on a T-shirt. That's got to be one of our next T-shirts. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1986. That was the day that Edward Meese gave a speech to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Meese was serving as Attorney General under President Ronald Reagan. During his speech, Meese encouraged bosses to spy on their employees in order to determine if they were using drugs. He said management also has to take responsibility for surveillance of problem areas such as locker rooms, parking lots, shipping and mail room areas, and even the nearby taverns if necessary as part of controlling this problem. He also advocated for drug testing of employees. Ronald Reagan had declared what he termed the war on drugs in 1982. Meese was outlining a plan to make the workplace a battlefront of that war. During his speech, he said, "The workplace is the strategic pass-through which almost all Americans move. Consequently, the workplace can be a choke point on this use or misuse of illegal drugs." After the speech, a spokesman for Meese assured the press that the Attorney General was not advocating for bosses to infringe on the civil liberties of their employees. Many workers and unions have disagreed with that assessment. Since 1987, drug testing by employers has risen more than 250%. In 1987, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that drug testing was a mandatory subject of bargaining. By all accounts, Reagan's war on drugs had little success in stopping drug use. In 2005, 82% of polled police and sheriffs called the war a failure. However, the war on drugs has handed a resounding victory to corporate special interests like drug testing companies and privatized prisons. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Got an email during the break pointing out, because look, I don't know all the details around Mike Johnson, I guess somewhat adopting this 14-year-old black kid. But it was written, apparently Mike met this black adolescent when Mike was in his 20s, and as I understand it, before he met his future wife, so apparently took him in as opposed to legally adopting him, and the details with regard to these circumstances in history have yet to be revealed. Appreciate what you do, respectfully yours. And look, I don't know, and I'm not making allegations. It does seems interesting, given the fact of the society that we're in, and I hate thinking like that. I hate that kind of suspicious thinking, but sadly we've seen, especially when people under the guise of religious zealotry, just very interesting. And finally, evidently Lauren Boebert has turned a new leaf. She is revamping her campaign strategy. I guess groping a guy in a theater while blowing smoke in people's face, not the best campaign literature. Evidently, kind of upset people in her district. And when you win an election by 546 votes, there's not a lot of room for error in ticking people off, which again always amazed me that she was in there with Marjorie Three Names. Marjorie Three Names could grope somebody in a theater and blow smoke in people's face and could never lose because the district's that badly skewed. But not when you're a 546 vote district. So now she's on an apology tour. Evidently, the person who reamed Obama for being an apologist is now apologizing. She's going to campaign events and apologizing to the loyal faithful to forgive her. And I'm it's dripping with it's our faith to forgive. It's what would Jesus do? You know this. And well, yes, Jesus wouldn't have groped anyone in a theater. You are absolutely correct. But yeah, so that's where we are. Got to hear your thoughts. Thank you for the email. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally and use a number of them here on the program. Appreciate you tuning in. Miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a moment, especially after December 1st, as we are going away from live terrestrial radio. So you're going to want to subscribe. Thanks for being here. See you back here next time.
been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.